There is an epidemic in this country of men not wanting to read, young men in particular. I decided to bring back this channel because of the recent election results. And if that's too much politics for you already, I don't give a fuck. I come from old school YouTube, so I don't care about ads or analytics and engagement and shit like that. This channel is obviously pretty old, and I had it originally as a spin-off from my main channel, Scotty Magister, which is older. And this channel intended to be like book reviews and also some media reviews. And then at the time, I was like, I don't see people really engaging with me or like watching this. I think I'm gonna forget about it. And some of it was cringe back then. I was just trying to like develop some kind of personality to this channel, and it didn't really work out. I wasn't really like figuring out what to do with it, and I left it alone. But it wasn't until recently that I noticed that some old videos had a lot of views and a lot of people were commenting and being like, oh, why haven't you made a video? Stuff like that. And I really regret not jumping into it sooner because BookTube is a thing now. I regret it not just for me personally, like getting into it and being rich and famous and whatever, but because I wish I had gotten the message out sooner about reading. Because going back to the point of this video, there is an attitude among young men that reading seems to be useless. And this was something that I heard rumors about and I wasn't paying attention, but now it has become really apparent. I'm the kind of writer that needs to write in public most of the time. So I frequent my local Barnes & Noble cafe and I go there, I write. If I'm having a moment and need to think, I look at all the books just to feel inspired. And I noticed just gradually over time that every other guy in the room is reading either manga or finance/self-help. And particularly not to shit on manga, like I'm a big manga reader. You can see some examples. The point I'm trying to make is that you're limiting your worldview, and manga can be tropey and it's recycled here and there. And self-help books, it's like, I really never liked self-help books. I also saw a thing where a lot of men are reading this book on power, which I have. Didn't really care for it because when someone is literally making you pay them to give you this magical set of words that'll fix your life, that just feels like a con. There's this whole attitude that I've now become aware of. You see these assholes online that say shit like this.
Reading books is a very cheap way to, I guess, entertain. I wouldn't call it entertainment. I can't just sit there, oh, and the pirate on the boat. Like, just for people with slow brain.
And guys asking, like, what's the point of reading a book if the author can't summarize what they're trying to say in the least number of words possible? And I think we need to dial it back. We're like, okay, we need to go back to basics. Like, what is the point of reading? Okay, you pick up a book, right? And you open it, and there's a page of like words everywhere, and it's like you're sitting here for like a couple hours hallucinating in your mind, and it's like, what's the fucking point of that? For one, it develops your cognitive abilities like language and critical thinking. It helps you see the bigger picture of things more often, because as this election showed, not everyone knows what the fuck is going on. Books help you think more about what the fuck is going on in the bigger picture. I am really worried that our future is quickly becoming like Fahrenheit 451. That's a really interesting cover, isn't it? I got it just because of that cover. I have multiple copies of this book. This was my favorite book for a very, very long time. And you see this, and a lot of conservatives are going to go like, oh yeah, book burning. That's like, the NAZI people. That's actually not the point of the book. Like, yes, book burning happens in this book, and it's a reference to those people. But the more important question is, why are they book burning? Why did censorship end up becoming a thing in this dreadful future world? And I don't want to brag, but like when I first started reading it, I felt like I immediately understood the core message, which is that television ruins intellectualism. Because if you remember, if you've read this, the main character's wife watches TV all the time, and she doesn't pay attention to anything else. And growing up, I saw that among certain adults. I saw adults being like, oh, Dr. Oz knows everything. Oh, Regis Philbin, he's such a good guy. And I just found that weird because it's like, you don't know these people. You're developing a parasocial relationship. And it's because of media like that that people become complacent and stop reading and just stop paying attention to what's going on in the world. It's not just the censorship. It's that people allowed censorship because they're too busy fucking looking at TikTok. It's that people are too busy watching Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson and Stephen Colbert and Bill Maher and things like that. The most important thing that I personally think reading gives you is a sense of empathy. There are so many experiences out there, so many kinds of people that you are never going to meet in your life. If you live in Bumfuckville, Oklahoma, you will most likely keep living in Bumfuckville, Oklahoma for most of your life and never get to experience 1,000,000,000 other things out there. Reading helps you empathize with people that you've never met before. It helps you experience things that you've never experienced before. It's like getting a little injection, being like, hey, this is what it feels like. Now, do I think this is the only issue surrounding this election? No, of course not. Reading really helps you with empathy and your critical thinking skills. Like, I've seen a lot of shit now, what people are saying, and it's like, a lot of you don't know how to think. Like, a lot of you have this half thought, you don't push further, and it's like, you're only a quarter there. You're not even halfway there. You're a quarter there, and you don't even see the other 3/4. And look, if you're upset about that, I'm just a guy on YouTube, okay? Whatever. 1v1 me on Smash, bitch. Sorry, chocolate break. And if you have a loved one who doesn't like to read because of those attitudes, I hope this video helps you get some ideas on how to get them to read and develop some kind of critical thinking. Obviously, not everyone reads at the same level, at the same speed. A lot of people have ADHD. There are remedies for that. Maybe you were laughed at when you were little in grade school, and now you're an adult, okay? You can do it on your own in your own private time, and no one will judge you for it. You can read whatever you want to read. You can read, grammar school level books. You can read Captain Underpants. You can read like young adult novels, like anything from like Animorphs to like Harry Potter, something on a more simpler level that you can read through quickly. You can listen to audiobooks, because I know some people with ADHD listen to audiobooks, and that is still valid. You are still reading. So I'm not going to go through my whole library and try to like critique each one and be like, oh, I think they should read this. No, this is like time is of the essence. So I just picked a bunch of books, just quick and dirty, like here. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, you should read Pride and Prejudice so that all the women will love you. Like, if you don't read, this is a big boy book, okay? You are going to struggle with this. This is archaic writing. So I'm not going to sit here and just tell you to read that right off the bat. The first thing, and this is going to be controversial for a lot of people, like even people who agree with me. I have been yelled at for suggesting this because there has been controversy surrounding this book that I was totally ignorant of for years, because I was just like, I like this book, and I liked it when I was little, and like, whatever. But apparently a lot of people out there fucking have an issue with this book. But I think this is a crucial first step in any young man who feels like they're not heard, who feels like they need help, as an introduction to reading. And that is The Catcher in the Rye. See, look, I know it's going to help you because it already says JD, so it's like, oh, Salinger. Okay, well, that's close enough, Now, this, like I said, I was not aware that there was so much controversy surrounding it. People see it as being part of incel culture. I just find it ironic because reading helps you develop empathy, so the fact that people are so unempathetic about this book is really telling and kind of disturbing, frankly. I'm just going to say something that's going to probably hurt a lot of people. If you find a huge issue with this book, you probably are not comfortable with your teenage self. I clearly am. Like, I can look back at that shit and be like, yeah, whatever. I feel like this book serves a purpose for young men. And this is the first step in realizing like, oh yeah, that fucking sucks, man, like from one guy to another. I feel like people read too much into this, like, oh, Holden Caulfield is like this genius, he's like a savior. And I was like, I never thought that when I was, a teenager. I read this and I liked it because it was the first time in school that I read that we had to read something that was this conversational and colloquial. It was just like, oh god, someone who like curses people off and tells them to go fuck themselves. It's like, yeah, that was like a breath of fresh air as opposed to reading like Nathaniel Hawthorne or some shit like that. So this is your first step, guys, in being introduced to the world of reading. Now here's the caveat, and I really, 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 really urge you to do this. Immediately after you finish reading this book, you have to read The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. And this is going to get a lot of people angry, again, because this already made a lot of people angry when I even lightly suggested this. These two books go hand in hand. This is a white male dude with some privilege who nonetheless feels depressed and can't connect with people. And this is a white female who has privilege, and she also has a cushy job, just like, Holden Caulfield is in this cushy prep school and whatever. And she also feels disconnected and depressed. And it's like, I noticed right off the bat, these have similar feelings and similar vibes, similar themes. And it's also around the same time period. Once you read both books back to back, that I feel like will trigger some kind of realization. Now, like I said, I picked out some books haphazardly because I feel like time is of the essence. A lot of these were recent books that I read, not all of them, but most of them. And there's also a good bunch of nonfiction books because I feel like men need to read nonfiction beyond just self-help and finance. They need to read about hidden history. They need to read about women. You need to read beyond your comfort zone. There are going to be some things that you need to learn, but because you have some misgivings, because you're like, it's like, you got to read it. You got to like look at it. Like, even if you don't buy the book, just fucking look at it. Just look at it. Just open a fucking page and just read it, okay? Just read a page. I don't care how much of it you read. I don't care if you buy it, if you pirate it, if you steal it, if you just pick it up in Barnes & Noble and just sit at the cafe and read the whole thing and don't give Barnes & Noble your money. I don't care how you do it. Just fucking try to read it, okay? First one is Not a Scientist by Dave Levitan. And this book I loved, and it could be partial because I'm a scientist myself. And, there was a lot of cool stuff about how politicians misconstrue and misunderstand a lot of science. And now I know it's going to seem like he targets a lot of Republicans. I mean, if we're gonna be honest, out of all the political parties out there, Republicans and science, they have a tenuous relationship. But he does go after Obama and some Democrats here, um, misconstruing science. So I feel like it's still encompassing a lot of politicians. And this was released right before Trump won the first time. So I feel like this is still really pertinent. This is still really current, and it's an easy read. The pages, they have a lot of spacing, and they have pictures of like data and stuff like that. See that. So I highly recommend this. Invisible Women: Data Bias in a World Designed for Men by Caroline Criado Perez. This book primarily deals with how we have been using the male model as the gold standard for all of human health, whereas women's health has been largely ignored. That is a very important issue, and this is really current, and it has so many facts, because I know y'all are having a hard on for facts, and whenever you argue with someone online, like I have, they're like, where are the facts? And it's like, right here, buddy. Right after the election, I was arguing with someone online, which is something I hadn't done in many, many years, but it happens. And they were like, actually, women's health everyone knows about. It's men's health that people don't know about. And I was like, actually, XYZ, buddy. And they were like, well, breast cancer is like, everyone knows about breast cancer. And it's like, okay, Mr. PhD, of course everyone knows about breast cancer. We have fallen into this lazy pitfall of like, yeah, it says that's what the data says, so it should relate to women. And it's like, no, that's not the case. Now, I know those of you who are familiar with listening to Joe Rogan, Andrew Tate, even not even Andrew Tate, but just like, stuff like that. You're going to open this up and you're going to read the introduction, and it's going to make you feel uncomfortable because right off the bat, Caroline calls out a lot of stuff, and you're not going to like it. Here's the thing about nonfiction books. You don't have to read everything in order. If you don't like how the introduction is sounding, if you feel like a certain part is like, okay, I get that, you can skip to like the next chapter and it'll be fine because there's no story. You can just open it and be like, oh, I want to read about like the drugs, or like, oh, I want to read about like mental health. Let me just look at that. So, Missoula, Rape and the Justice System in a College Town. I devoured this book because it was really engaging. This guy is a well-known journalist, and he wrote very objectively, and he goes through all these court cases that happened in this town concerning rape, but he also brings in other related cases because it's in general about rape culture and rape culture in a college town. And there was so much enlightening information that, like, even though you think you know everything about rape, when you read a lot of these cases, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And so the next time someone tries to say some shit like, well, why don't women just do X, Y, Z? There's information in here that explains those situations. Really, really well written. I literally devoured this in the manner of like a week. How to Think Like a Woman by Regan Penaluna. And I'm sorry if I butchered your name if you're watching this, because I never said that out loud. But this is about female philosophers, because when you think of a philosopher, you think of Socrates, Plato, Kant, Kierkegaard. They're all guys. Well, this book drew me in because I was like, oh, female philosophers. That's interesting. You never hear about that because history doesn't really like to talk about women. Here's another attitude that I've noticed. It's that, like, I've seen these like clips of like very terrible podcasts, and like I don't remember which one it is, but one of them was like these two dudes like, hey, what are some hobbies that like women do? And the other guy was like, I don't know. And then the other dude was like, yeah, like women don't really have hobbies. Like, yeah, like and it's like, oh my god, you're fucking, yeah, this helps crush that stupid belief, because as we all know, academics, almost every field in academics is dominated by men. The Tale of Princess Fatima, Warrior Woman. I'm throwing this in there because this is an ancient Arabic epic, and I feel like a lot of people don't feel like there's such a thing. Think about the hero's journey from that guy Joseph Campbell, and it's like always about like, male heroes, Greek heroes. It wasn't until recently that I learned that Joseph Campbell didn't believe that women could also go through the hero's journey. When I learned about the hero's journey, I just thought of like, oh yeah, any kind of hero. I didn't really read between the lines that he was suggesting that like this is only a guy thing. Well, fuck you, Joseph Campbell, because there are ancient female epics and stories, and they go through a hero's journey. And the tale of Princess Fatima, Warrior Woman, is one of those. I'm going to close on a genre I never actually read before until this year, really. I never really read poetry, and as a writer, I felt self-conscious about that because I was like, oh, I should read more poetry, but like I just didn't get it. A lot of poetry just like, there was a friend in college who tried to get me into reading E.E. Cummings, and she had me read like her favorite poem. It was like Pity This Busy Monster, and I was reading it and I was just like, I don't get it. I don't get it. And I was really self-conscious about it because it's like, does every writer understand poetry? Because I don't. I don't fucking get this. I don't get why people, what is the thing? It's like also like the formatting, and it's like one page and it's like one sentence and like the rest of the page is blank, and you're like, what, why do people think this? And it's like, but anyway, I was looking through the poetry section because also in Barnes and Noble they tend to put like ancient epics like Gilgamesh and Iliad and stuff like that in with the rest of poetry. So I was looking for like a different version of like Gilgamesh or whatever, a different translation. And the first poet that drew me in was Trista Matir. And again, I've never said this name out loud before, so I'm sorry if I butchered it. She wrote Aphrodite made me do it, Artemis made me do it, and Persephone made me do it. And this was the very first time that I got warped into poetry. Like I was reading it and it was simple enough for me to get it, and also complex enough for me to appreciate how it was written. Like the reason why these specific words are organized this way, and like they end in a certain spot because they make you think in that moment like, oh yeah, shit, and then you go to the next page, and that whole thing just flowed so beautifully. And this theme of like taking these Greek female myths, like Aphrodite, Artemis, and Persephone, and obviously spinning like a feminist angle to it, because here's the thing about Greek myths, like we think we know them, but like we conveniently forget that like a lot of the women in them have been vilified, like Medusa, or like we misunderstand them, like Persephone. She relates them to like her personal experience and like the experience of women today, where like women today are still experiencing these injustices that these Greek female heroes from years ago experienced. I really was into like all the like collages and stuff like that, because that's another thing about modern poetry. Like it's not just writing the words, but also like people do this thing now where they put pictures and like do some kind of art with it, some kind of like modern art, and I liked it. I liked it a lot, and it really stayed with me. And then we have "Sorry I Haven't Texted You Back" by Alicia Cook. The cover first drew me in because it's a really cool cover, but then right away when I first started reading the very first poem, I was like, oh, guys need to read this. If you're having issues with your girlfriend and you don't quite understand why, you need to read this. I am just saying that right now. You need to fucking read this. These poems are about mental health and depression, but I feel like it's much more than that, because it pertains to being in a relationship with depression. It's written in the format of like, oh, here's a track list for this cassette. And then it's just brilliant because it also has the remixes, and it's just like a whole metaphor for like reading between the lines or like seeing another message. You have, when you're in a relationship, there's always the surface level stuff, and then there's the stuff in between that you're not getting. And I feel like that's the whole point of this book. Reading will make you realize that if you go out of your comfort zone, you will like a lot of things that you will never realize that you like. And even a bad book has a really good line. The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, you think of that as like a surface level thriller. It's not going to contribute much to anything. And that's also like this snobbish attitude out there in literature, like, oh, this isn't real literature. I really implore you to just get rid of that thinking. But I remember reading this many years ago because I was also reading James Bond novels. Someone introduced me to John Le Carre. I think that's how you say his name. I don't know. And it's also spy novels, obviously. And like the last 20% of this book, like, you ever like read a book and it like flips your sense of morality, and like your emotions are tied up in a knot, and you're just like left with this very strange taste in your mouth, and you're just like, what the fuck? That was this. And I really appreciated reading this book. And that's where I want to end at, because when people say like, what's the point of reading this whole thing if you can just summarize it for me? Like, what's the difference between you reading this book from like page 1 to the very end, like 200 pages or so. How is that different from you just telling me what happens in this book? From you just telling me like, oh, so it's about this, and this person dies, and then this person realizes this, and that's the end. Because that's not the human experience. The human experience can't be summarized. There are people that I'm sure you've like struggled with trying to understand something. I know I have. Sometimes you go through something, and then later on you notice like your friend going through the same thing, and you're just like, oh, well, the way I figured it out was this, that, but they still are like, nah, man, I can't do that. And then you start to realize that people can only learn through going through the entire experience. And that is the point of reading, because it emulates the human experience. The human experience is you going about your daily life, and you meet people, and people withhold information, and people lie and cheat, and like they're friends with you one minute and then they're not the next, or like they're enemies with you the first, but then you actually grow to become friends. That is the human experience. That cannot be summarized into a single sentence or a single paragraph. You have to live through it. And that's eventually what reading does. It makes you go through the whole journey as if you did yourself in real life.